All right, let's dive into the story of how India's foreign policy has completely transformed over the last 70 plus years. We're talking about a journey from a brand new independent nation to a major power that's now shaping the world stage. This one phrase just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures this huge shift from a country just trying to stay out of big global fights to one that now actively influences the outcome of those fights. So here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start by looking at the two big eras of Indian diplomacy, then walk through the key moments that changed everything, and we'll wrap up with the strategic playbook India is using right now. Okay, first up, a tale of two Indias. It's kind of hard to imagine now, but back in 1947, India was seen as this very fragile new country. Fast forward to today, and it's considered an essential global power. This didn't happen by chance. It was a long, deliberate, and often difficult evolution. And this, right here, really shows the two core philosophies behind that journey. Just look at the change. The core philosophy went from being all about principles to being about pure pragmatism. The global role shifted from just being a neutral observer to becoming the balance itself. And the main goal, it went from insulation, trying to keep the world out, to actively pursuing global leadership. So that brings us to section 2, the era of non-alignment. Let's go back and see how this all got started, because for a very long time, this idea defined everything about India's foreign policy.
I just love this description. The non-aligned movement was basically India sending a formal RSVP to the Cold War, a polite but very firm no thanks. It grew out of these big conferences in New Delhi and Bandung, and it was a way for all these newly independent countries to avoid getting sucked into the rivalry between the US and the Soviet Union.
Okay, so the whole strategy was built on three main ideas. First, unity, to bring post-colonial nations together so they wouldn't become pawns in someone else's game. Second, neutrality, to basically try and keep the Cold War out of Asia. And third, to take the moral high ground, to be a voice of justice on the world stage. And this earned India a lot of prestige. But as they would soon find out, prestige alone isn't nearly enough. And that brings us to section 3, a geopolitical awakening. This is where that idealism collided with some cold, hard reality. Yeah, the 1960s were just a brutal wake-up call. There was a really tough defeat in the 1962 war with China, and that was followed by another major war with Pakistan in 1965. These conflicts really exposed how vulnerable India's neutral stance was. It learned the hard way that not choosing a side also means you might not have any powerful friends when you really, really need them. And check this out. The weakness wasn't just military. It was economic, too. India needed to import 10 to 11 million tons of wheat every single year, mostly from the US. And this gave Washington what's called transactional leverage. So when India criticized the Vietnam War, the US basically used food aid as a weapon to pressure New Delhi. And it all came down to this one very tough lesson. While principles may elicit praise, they do not provide protection. Man, that one sentence just sums up the entire awakening, doesn't it? India realized that if it wanted real independence, it had to build it on its own internal strength. Which leads us straight into section 4, the shift to realism. This wasn't about throwing away its principles, not at all. It was about grounding them in actual power. So two big things happened that were key to this newfound autonomy. First, the Green Revolution made India self-sufficient in food. That removed a huge point of foreign leverage right there. And second, the Indo-Soviet Treaty. With the US getting cozy with China, India made a formal alliance with the Soviets to protect its own interests. That was a massive step away from its old strict neutrality. But of course, right when India starts to get its feet on solid ground, the whole world shifts again. The Soviet Union, its main partner, collapsed. And that happened at the exact same time as a major economic crisis at home. This forced India to make another huge pivot. So what did they do? Well, you can see the results right here. India launched its Look East policy to connect with the fast-growing economies in Asia. It made its long secret ties with Israel official, and it started a major reset with the US, which eventually led to the big civil nuclear deal. It was basically diversifying its foreign policy portfolio, just like you would with stocks. And all of that brings us to section 5, mastering multi-alignment. This is the sophisticated playbook that's the result of all those hard-earned lessons. The philosophy today is pretty simple, but it's also incredibly powerful. Be in every room, but only in your corner. It's all about engaging with absolutely everyone, but always, always with the goal of advancing India's own national interests. And this is where it gets really fascinating. Think about this for a second. India is a key member of the Quad, which is a security group with the US, Japan, and Australia, basically to act as a balance against China. At the very same time, it's a founding member of BRICS, working with China and Russia to push for the interests of the global South. It's literally in both rooms. And it doesn't stop there. Here's another perfect example of this balancing act. India is developing a critical port in Iran to boost trade and connectivity. And simultaneously, it's buying some of the world's most advanced military technology from Iran's biggest rival, Israel. That right there is multi-alignment in action. So let's bring this all home with our final section. The biggest takeaway here is the incredible journey from being a dependent nation to a global donor. I mean, the numbers really do speak for themselves. The very same country that once relied on food aid has now given over $48 billion in assistance to 65 other countries since the year 2000. It has completely flipped the script from being a recipient to a benefactor. And you can see this newfound strength everywhere. During the pandemic, it earned the nickname the pharmacy of the world for supplying vaccines everywhere. And in its own neighborhood, it's become the first responder whenever there's a natural disaster. This is what it looks like to be a true net security provider. Which leaves us with this one big final question to think about. As India's power continues to grow and the world gets more and more divided, can it keep up this balancing act and be a friend to all? Or will the pressures of this new world eventually force it to choose a side?